Hello to and welcome to our webinar today. My name is David Jones. I'm from Interfacing Technologies and I'll be the moderator today. Would like to first thank you for taking the time to attend the webinar today. We're just going to wait a little longer for some of the other people to come on, but in the meantime, let me talk to you and explain a bit about interfacing. Interfacing's core product is in a product called Enterprise Process Center. The Enterprise Process Center delivers a range of functionality covering business process management, quality management, governance, risk control, and enterprise architecture. It also has a low-code rapid development as well as performance analytics. We've been recognized by many bodies across the world, including Gartner, CIO Review, and Knowledge Management World. We have been a leader in the BPM industry for over 25 years, and we currently have over 1 million users of our product in 46 countries. We have global operations with offices in multiple geographies and provide 24/7 support. We also provide ISO 27001 and GDPR certification for our own processes and systems. The product covers blueprinting, documentation and governance of processes, analysis improvement, regulatory management, quality management, low-code automation, strategy and performance, risk management and audits. So let's get started on the webinar today. Every organization produces goods and services that require collaboration across the organization. Once the need is determined, designed, building, selling, installation, and maintenance of the product and services will be complete. The only way this is successfully achieved is through cross-functional processes, specifically process-based management. To discuss how reimagining management involves putting process management at the center of business management is our speaker today, Roger Tregear. Roger has spent his working life talking, consulting, thinking and presenting and writing about the analysis, innovation and improvement and management of business processes. He helps organizations improve their performance. As the principal advisor at Tregear BPM, Roger provides business process and problem analysis consulting services. He has 36 years experience as a business management and IT consulting. It would come as no surprise that Roger has an incredibly well-developed insight into business improvement and problem resolution. At the end of this webinar, we will have a brief Q&A session, so please feel free to post your questions in the webchat and we'll answer them later. At this time, let me thank you again for coming, and I will ask Roger to take over now for the presentation.
Thanks, David. Let's get set up here. Whoops. Yeah. Wrong presentation. Now we're good. So thank you for that. And thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon to talk about my favorite topic, process-based management. I see some familiar names on the list as it's building. Hi, Emmett. G'day, Phil. And some new friends joining as well. So good to make contact. And thanks for sharing this time with us. This is called Reimagining Management. It's the name of my book as well, and it was a very deliberately chosen name because it's exactly what I mean to talk about, how we need to reimagine management. how to put process right there in the center of the management of our businesses. My thanks to Interfacing for organising this session and for inviting me to present as well. So David's told you lots about me, so I won't bore you by doing that again. But the point of this slide is to show that a wide range of client logos there, just a selection of people I've worked for over the years. And I think the point of that is that there's a wide range of organizations. There's some very large organizations that many of you will recognize. There's some small ones, perhaps you don't. There are private sector and public sector organizations. There are people in different organizational cultures and certainly different national cultures as well across that selected list. So everything I'm going to talk about today either came out of and/or is used in these organizations. So we know that it works, and it works in any organization, anywhere, of any type. Sure, there's a couple of little changes you'd want to do in any particular organization, just a few little adjustments at the edges to make things fit nicely into the ecosystem. But we know that it works in every organization. I've never been in an organization where it didn't work. So we can know for sure that it'll work in your organization. That's the good news. So I would do this work all over the world. I've delivered consulting and/or training, various other activities in, I think it's like 15 countries now. So a wide range of experience as well. And I do that through my business partners around the world, in Lulu Process in the US, BPT Consulting in Africa, the ES Group throughout the Arab states. Q3 Edge is my partner in India, and I think I'm right, the CEO, Amit Chauhan, is online with us. So we've done lots of work there together. And of course, here in Australia, I also have partners with Leonardo and Affection. Now, I'm currently somewhere under that big red dot down there on the Australian East Coast. I live in a little village called Bungendore, which you may not have heard of, but it's 20 kilometres or so from Canberra, which you, I hope, have heard of. So we live here just in the village in a semi-rural lifestyle, and that's where I am right now because my office is here at home. So that's what I'm doing. That's where I come from. I just want to, if you'll indulge me a moment, I just want to tell you about a new project we're really just starting now. It's with an organisation called the Royal Commission for Alula, and Alula is an area in Saudi Arabia, in the northwest of Saudi Arabia, kind of north of Jeddah, if you like. Quite a large area. It's some 22,000 square kilometres. And it's one of these places that's full of these seriously ancient sites, you know, buildings carved out of sandstone mountains, millennia old. And we're just starting a project there now. So, and the Royal Commission for Alula are the people who are building tourism and community and the economy and pulling all of that together in a whole new county within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I'll be here in Bungendore, of course, because they're not doing any traveling. So I'll be here in my office right where I am now, and we'll be having using some neat technology to do the kind of work that I'll talk about soon, building process architectures and starting to use them. And I'll be doing that with people whose job it is to build a living museum out of these ancient sites. So they're a lovely juxtaposition, and we're really looking forward to getting stuck into that project. Okay, now let's get going. I want to define first some basics, and this is the most basic you can get, isn't it? Defining a process. But I always like to do this because I often find that people have a different understanding of process, and if we can't agree, or at least understand our disagreement about process, then it's going to be downhill from there. So let me tell you how I think about a process. And you can disagree with me, of course, but at least you'll know the basis that I build on. So we can all agree with this, I would think, that a process of series of related activities It's triggered by some event, and it's all about transforming a set of inputs into some outputs. I call this the minimalist definition of process. I feel like it's the kind of boxes and arrows view. It's a really simple process model view of a process. Perfectly accurate, nothing wrong with it, except I think it's missing some things. I would include in my conception of a process not only the boxes and arrows, but all of the things that are required to execute it and to manage it. So all of those resources, assets, all of the people and the data and the IT and the systems and the rules and the trucks and the buildings, anything required for the execution of the process, I think is inherently part of the process, and ultimately we should capture it like that. Importantly, we also need to keep in mind the purpose of the process. And it's all about delivering value, which is to say products or services, to customers and other stakeholders outside the organization. That's a really important point. I take it one step further, and I would say to you that the only way that any organization can deliver value outside the organization is via its cross-functional business processes. Now you can test that idea for me. Think about your organization chart. Can you identify on that chart one box that by itself could deliver value outside the organization? And I can hear you all saying, no, we can't. Well, of course you can't, because that's not the way organization charts work. You know, we get work done across the organization, don't we? That's how we get it done. So I take a much more holistic view of what a process is. And I think it makes life much easier when we start later to talk about process improvement and process management and how all of this fits into the broader model of management. So process, the holistic view is what I base all of what I do on. Now, cross-functional value delivery, as I was just saying, is what it's all about. It's actually why organizations exist, every organization. Here's an example. We haven't done much of this recently, I guess, but we remember how it works. We get to the airport and check in, we board the plane, complete the flight, retrieve our luggage, we hope, depart the airport. Now, if I said to you, which of those needs to go really well for you to have had a great flight? Again, I can hear you say, well, all 5 of them, Roger. Of course. There's no point having a great check-in. We get the upgrade, plane departs on time, great flight, exactly the movie I wanted, get to the other end and your luggage doesn't. That's not going to be a great flight. For you or the airline. Airlines spend a vast amount of money finding lost luggage or mishandled baggage, as they would call it. Also, if we get there and our luggage does, and then we have to wait an hour in the rain for a taxi, that's not going to be a great flight either. And, you know, airlines and airports used to say, well, we don't run the transport systems. But they have a different view these days, particularly privately owned airports. They think about this process, the higher order process about relocate traveller. And they know that each of those elements needs to work well by itself, but perhaps even more importantly, it needs to work well together. Because that's the customer journey, isn't it? A literal journey in this case. The customer journey is from home to hotel, hotel to home, or even hotel to hotel. And that's what we gauge. And that's what we have to get right. So we have examples of this in all of our organizations, don't we? You can think of one for your own organization, I'm sure. It's about cross-functional value delivery. And we're starting to see here, aren't we, the cross-functional process at work. And it's being contributed to by many different people. And who's managing relocate traveller? We'll come back to that point. Here we are. This is, I think, the #1 principle of process-based management. I call it the primacy of process, and it goes like this. There are 2 dimensions to our organizations. The functional organization, or the vertical, but we also have what I'm calling the process organization, the horizontal view of the organization. We have both of these, and they're different. And one is not the same as the other. One's not a derivation of the other. They're two things, and we need to manage both of them. In the vertical direction, it's mainly about managing resources. And the key artifact, of course, is going to be the organisation chart. So it tells us who reports to who, how we group people of like skills or like objectives, where the delegations and authorities are. Really important stuff. It's about how we manage up and down the organisation. But we know, don't we, that when we get work done in an organisation, one part does something, next part does something else, someone does something else, someone does another thing, and then we get to deliver something. So we're actually working across the organisation, across the org chart. So we're creating, accumulating, and delivering value across the organisation. The key artifact there is going to be the process architecture. By the way, if we say that this is the way in which we create, accumulate, and deliver value across the organisation, it's the same as saying this is how we execute strategy. This is how we operationalize that vision, mission, objectives, however you formulated your statement of strategic intent. This is where the rubber hits the road, because this is how we execute the strategy. Now, we know that there's lots of management going on up and down the org chart, don't we? Most management is happening up and down, mainly down, I guess, but it's in the vertical direction. But in this horizontal direction, the direction in which we're executing strategy and actually delivering value to customers, who's monitoring that? Who's managing across the organisation chart? Well, unless you've specifically done something about it, nobody is, because the org chart doesn't comment on that. It's not what an org chart does. Sure, we could go to the top and we could say the CEO is in charge, but she knew that, and it's not a very practical thing, is it? I mean, who is it that on a day-by-day or a minute-by-minute basis is saying, is this cross-functional process working? Who's saying, did relocate traveller work well yesterday? Who's saying, what do we think it's going to do tomorrow? Who's doing that? Whose job is that? Well, it's probably nobody's, unless we've had this horizontal layer of process-based management added. So that's the primacy of process, and if I had to use just one slide for this presentation, it would have been this one. This is, I think, the fundamental slide that says what process-based management is all about. Now, I've been using the term process-based management. You might be thinking, why are you saying process-based management and not BPM? Well, I will end up saying both of them. I don't use BPM a lot because, as you know, it has all sorts of meanings for all sorts of people. I mean, when you say BPM, some people think of software, or they'll think of process automation, or they'll think of process improvement, all sorts of things. Other people might think, well, it's a management philosophy. I'm in that camp. So I think of process-based management is a much more meaningful term. It is what it says on the tin. It's we're going to manage the organisation through our processes. But I will use process-based management and BPM, those two terms, I'll use them as synonyms. I'll use them interchangeably. Sometimes, of course, BPM is just the easier way to do it, or it's what everyone's calling it, so we need to do it. But you'll hear me say process-based management a lot, and what I mean by that is what it says, or if you want to use the term BPM, then I mean the same thing. I mean this management philosophy of how we run our organisations. My designer was quick to point out to me that if you look at that bottom right-hand corner, that my logo wasn't going to work so well if it said Tregear process-based management. She thought that was a bit much, and probably she was right. Okay, so BPM, process-based management, how do I define those? Well, this is my definition. It's about continuous management of the set of processes, this architecture of processes that we're using to create, accumulate, deliver value, which is to say, execute the strategy. But why are we doing that? We're doing that because we want to actively optimize the performance, particularly of high impact processes. So we need to do two things, continuous management and continuous improvement. Now, many organizations, I guess most organizations, are doing something like continuous improvement. Yeah, it may not be quite as continuous as you'd like it to be, and sometimes the improvement's a bit hard to find, but we're all trying to make stuff work better. What too few organizations are doing, and my whole point about process-based management, is that we also need to be doing continuous management of our processes, continuously making evidence-based decisions about where to invest scarce analysis resources into what is effectively an infinite space. So this definition is nicely bookended with continuous management and continuous improvement, and we need to do both. The point of continuous management, though, is to improve our ability to continuously improve. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, here's the Tregear circles. I've spent 20 years drawing two circles. Some people think I might have a productivity problem, but I've been trying to keep this as simple as possible. And I think what we have here is a sort of meta model for management generally, and it also defines a kind of perpetual improvement engine. Two circles, the PO or process ownership circle and the PI or process improvement circle. Now, when we're talking about the circles, we're talking about one process at a time. Big process or small process, doesn't matter. Any process. So we're talking about one process at a time. Let's start with the PO circle. You can see that the PO circle has three nodes: target, assess, respond. Target, assess, respond. I think this is the drumbeat of process-based management. Target, assess, respond. Target, assess, respond. It's the continuous piece of continuous management. So let's start with target. We're going to set process KPIs. Remember, I said process KPIs. It might be different to all those functional KPIs you've already got. If this process was working as well as its key stakeholders wanted to, what would it be doing and how would we know? So what are those critical few KPIs? What are the targets for those KPIs? Okay, so now we've got some targets and we've got targets for the KPIs. Now the next node is assess. We're going to do two things there. One is we're going to think about performance management. The KPI says target is 9 out of 10 and we've got 8.8 out of 10, okay? Or we've got 9.2 out of 10. What is it? What's the actual measurement, the measured performance? And we'll think in a moment about what we do about any performance gaps. So that's the measured performance against the target. But we also here have to deal with idea management. Because what about all of those innovative ideas that people have got? Maybe the KPIs are all fine, seemingly, but that doesn't mean we can't improve the process. There might be some new technology or a new idea, a new model, a new way of doing it that might be useful. So two things we've done there at assess. We've done performance management and idea management. Now we're going to respond. It's the third node, and of course, if we're not going to respond, then that was a waste of time. So three things might happen with respond. We might say everything's okay, KPIs all green, nothing to think about here, targets are good, nothing to see, no ideas to test, everything's fine, move on. And that might be the common experience for a nicely stable process that's working as well as you want it to. Okay. Second thing we might want to do is say it's time to review our targets and KPIs, because we should do that regularly anyway. Or maybe something's changed in the environment, or maybe we're seeing that something we're measuring seems to have become a constant. And of course, if it really is a constant, we don't need to measure. We can simplify the process or find a better KPI. The third thing we might want to do is say, okay, there is a performance anomaly we've got to analyze, or there's an idea we've got to test, and we need to intervene. So what are we going to do? Well, I'm sure you're way ahead of me. We're going to trigger the PI circle. Now, the PI circle here is shown in its most generic form, but it's about process improvement. So here I'm showing as is, to be, to do. So current state, future state, and to do is my shorthand way of saying all of the things we've got to do to create the new as is, which of course is the point of process improvement, isn't it? We don't want to stop at to be, we want to create a new as is. Now, you could substitute here any process improvement method that you like. Lean, Six Sigma, DMAIC, NEST, Sprint PIP, CME, BP trends, something you made up, doesn't matter, because they're all going to be of the form of in some way as is to be to do. So we've triggered the PI circle, and let's imagine we've got some changes we want to make. Now, sometimes those changes happen quickly, sometimes they take months, maybe many months. Were they effective? Did the change work? Are we any good at process improvement? You know, what was the measure before and what's the measure after? Well, the PO circle is going to tell us that, isn't it? Because the PO circle keeps turning. The PI circle is going to turn once every time we trigger it, but the PO circle will keep turning. And it turns at a speed that's appropriate to the cadence of the process. You know, if you've got a process that's happening in real time, then that's spinning like crazy. Maybe it's something that happens every day or every week. Or maybe you're in charge of the process by which people have national elections. Well, maybe you've got a data set once every 4 years. That has some challenges. So the PO circle keeps turning. So we're always saying, how is this process performing? What are the risks? What could change? What's happening? Is it stable? Those kinds of things. So this is a continuous piece of continuous management. And of course, continuous improvement means that we're going to be all the time looking at individual processes to find if we can find ways for which there's a business case to make change to get better performance. So I will talk a lot about getting the circles turning, and this is what I mean, get the circles turning. And we can do this for one process. You know, you could find one process in your organization and set this up. This is not that difficult. We can probably do better than one, but we'll talk later about how to build up, but it can be done incrementally and should be done incrementally. Okay, so we've got the circles turning, but that wasn't magic. I mean, how do we get them to turn? Must be something that needs to kickstart it and keep it going. You know? Okay, so these are the 7 enablers of BPM. These are 7 things that I know for a fact you need to be developing in sync to give yourself a chance of getting process-based management to work and be sustained. I use that Mobius strip icon because it has the feature of not having a start and a finish. I use that because each of these 7 enablers is important. They're all necessary. None of them are sufficient. If one is missing, you'll have a problem. Now, in my book, Reimagining Management, there's a chapter on each of these. So you're going to get the bullet point version of each of these now as we whiz around the set. But this will give you some sense of what it is we're looking for. They're all equally important, but of course, we need an architecture before we can do anything. So a process architecture, by that I just mean we need to identify the processes. We need to make them visible. If we don't know what our processes are, then we're going to have a problem. Now we need to know 2 things about measurement. We want to know how it should be performing and how is it performing. That'll give us a performance gap, perhaps. And at process governance, we're going to decide whether we care about the gap. You know, all our organizations have got hundreds or indeed thousands of processes, and most of them could be made to work better. But we've got a very finite, limited amount of resource that we can apply to process improvement, analysis and improvement. We've got a finite resource and effectively an infinite space to apply it to. So we need to make some clever decisions. You know, where is the return on process? That's what governance is all about. And we need to be making change, because if we're not delivering change, by which I mean proven, valued business benefits, then everything else is a waste of time. And by our own definition as process practitioners, we should be eliminated. That would be a bit embarrassing. So change is important. It's in the center of this list, but it's fundamental to what we do. If we can't prove that we've delivered valued business benefits, then what are we talking about? And a business benefit is not we've modeled 500 processes. That might be a necessary step. Well, I'm not sure about 500, but modeling is a necessary step, of course. But you know, your business does not have a problem called we don't have enough process models. I know that for a fact because no business does. So moving on, we need a mindset, or if you like, a shared understanding, a shared culture-aware mindset about process-aware culture that lets us all think about process in the same way, to understand that it's important and what we're going to do about it. And then we've got to be able to do stuff. You know, everybody in the organization can can and should make some contribution to process analysis and improvement and management. The subject matter experts in your processes are out there executing them right now. So, it doesn't mean everyone's 5,000 people not going to go off and do a training course, no. But we do need a development plan that lets various cohorts of people develop the capabilities that they need. Of course, we will have a centralized support group, a small group who are the super users, who do some QA, who understand in detail how process improvement methodologies are supposed to work. They're the coaches, the mentors. And I think their main job is to raise the capability of the rest of the organization. I think it's a big mistake to say we're going to centralize all of our process work in this group of people, because it doesn't matter how big it is. If they're successful, they're going to become a bottleneck. And now you've created the Office for the Prevention of Process Improvement. That's not going to go down too well. So these are the 7 enablers. We need to keep all of those developing. We need a plan for each. None of them will happen, by magic or automatically or organically. You need a plan. It's not hard to do, but you do need to think it through and have a plan and maintain it. Okay. Now, I've said the key artifact is a process architecture. Well, let's have a look at one. I'm going to show you, obviously, their PowerPoint pictures, and please don't think I'm saying you should manage your processes in PowerPoint. That's not going to work. But PowerPoint's not a bad presentation tool, albeit a dreadful modeling tool. So this is, you might have gathered already, a hospital. It's a teaching hospital. So I would always have, I would think about shared management processes, core processes in the middle here, and shared support processes. Now, management and support processes are common. 80–90% of them are common across every organization. There'll be some specific ones, and maybe some of the terminology changes, but mainly they're the same. The core processes are the ones that are going to, effectively execute on the strategy. So this is a hospital, it's a teaching hospital, so care for patients. Develop healthcare professionals is about it's part of a university, so it's about their university involvement, their teaching involvement. Create and apply knowledge is about the research they do. And develop wellness awareness is their community outreach program. So we develop all of that in conjunction with them. So you see there's a high-level core process called care for patients. Here's 2 more levels of that process. Now, and again, this is just a PowerPoint, but you can see that in those, the ones running horizontally, there's a kind of patient life cycle there. So we work our way through, and we develop these in workshops with the subject matter experts. This is a project that I ran. I've had, thank goodness, very little to do with hospitals. A very long time ago, I had my tonsils out, but I don't even remember it. So I'm certainly not an expert in hospitals, or I have no subject matter expertise really for any of my client work, but I help them put these pictures together because they're the experts. So, and we can see now how we can start drilling up and down, and then you've got this in a proper modeling environment, and now it's a management tool. Here's another one. So this was a university project, the university in Australia, multi-campus, digital plus bricks and mortar, the usual complex university structure we have these days. In Australian capital city is its main campus, but it has other campuses in Australia and throughout Southeast Asia. So when we're building a process architecture, and when you're going to build a process architecture, we need to start with strategy. And I mean literally with the vision mission. So here's a summary of the university's strategy. It was quite a lengthy document, and it's a university. So, we had workshops full of academics who wrote PhDs on strategy. So some of the workshops were interesting. But we can think about the university strategy. This is their value propositions, if you like. So it's about developing good students, of course, to having a targeted position as researchers, and to make contribution to community. So nothing terribly surprising there, but that's the sort of value proposition summary of the strategy. And then we can make the connection then from there to the highest level process. Now, I did that by just going click, click, click. In real life, it's not quite that easy. But we just talk it through and we say, okay, what do? We produce graduates and we have lots of arguments about the words to use, etc. But we end up with a set of high-level core processes. And then we can translate that. You can see over on the left-hand side, that's our original set of core processes, and then we can create from that the process architecture. And that's a picture of this university, by the way, of everything it does. A high-level picture, of course, but it's everything it does. And you'll see there that produce graduate turned into 2 different high-level processes, ones for undergraduate and postgraduate using the terminology that they use. So now you've come down a level, you decompose, you can keep decomposing down there as deep as you need to develop understanding, or to understand a problem, to drill down as deep as you want to. So these are process architectures and a quick view of how you might do it. Now, what we're trying to do here, of course, is build something more than just an artifact. You know, and process-based management is not just an artifact. You know, I want to say that the M in BPM doesn't stand for modeling, it stands for management. So if you've done any gardening at all, or even if you haven't, you can know that building a garden is a bit more than having a packet of seeds and a shovel. You know, if you're going to build something like this is my garden in my backyard. You believe that? If you do, I've got a harbour bridge to sell you. Now this might be in the backyard of my dreams, but anyway, it's someone's garden. And we know that there's all sorts of things that go into firstly designing and then building that and then maintaining it, and it changes, and we need to be all the time doing lots of things to build this garden system. Well, it's the same when we're building a management system. It's not good enough just to have all the pieces if they're not working together well, if they're all separated, if we have this kind of functional boxes view of the organization. Things will only come together because people do heroic stuff, or we get lucky, or customers fix the problem for us. So what we want to do is build a process-based management system. And I think that's what we get out of circles that are enabled to turn. So when we're talking about process management, process-based management, or BPM, process improvement, all of that stuff, I think we need to take a systemic view. You know, we're trying to build here a management system, not just a bunch of models. And it's not something we do once a year, it's something we do all the time. You know, that's the continuous piece of continuous management and continuous improvement. Yeah? So how do we do that? Well, again, a one-slide version of this, but first, you know, catch your process architecture. You need to know what the processes are. And if I was starting from scratch, then I would do 3 levels, from those highest level core processes and down 2 levels. Just as a starting point, it gives you 200 or 300 processes usually, and it's, you know, it's a good way to start. Now, but it is 200 or 300 processes, and if you went down another level or 2, you're talking about thousands of processes, and we're never going to manage all of those actively. So just pick some. I always say 5. You could do it for 1 if you wanted to. I think we can be a little more adventurous than that. I wouldn't go more than 5 because what we want to do then is get the circles turning for those 5. So what's that mean? Well, we need a process owner. We're going to do targets, KPIs, and then their targets. We're going to start collecting data. We're going to learn how to do that assessment. We might need to trigger the PI circle. We're just going to start the continuous management piece and then trigger the PI circle when we need to. And if you try and do that with 30 processes, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it makes life very difficult. You know, this is all new, and you don't have lots and lots of people sitting around with nothing to do. So we need to be a little careful about this. Just do it incrementally. And when those 5 are stable, which might be in a couple of months, pick another 5. In a couple of months, when those 10 are stable, maybe by then, because you're getting good at this, maybe you can pick another 10. You know, now we've got 20 processes under active management. And pretty soon you'll get to having 30, maybe 40 processes under active management. And you'll get to that point, I think, with higher quality and better results than if you tried to do 30 from the start. The big bang is really difficult. And by the way, many organizations, even large and complex ones, will find that they've got 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 processes that they can identify as the high impact processes, the ones that if they go wrong, there's going to be tears before bedtime, the ones we really need to get right. It's not hundreds and it's not thousands. It's not practical to say we're going to manage all of that. But if you've got 20, 30 processes under active management, high impact processes, then you're doing well. You're certainly doing process-based management. So we can ease our way into this. We don't have to do it all in a big bang. We could just do it for one process if we want, build a management system. And of course, what we're doing here is building this continuous improvement engine. And we're demonstrating it. I call these pilot processes for a reason. We want to demonstrate for the rest of the organization how it works and how we can expand it beyond what we're currently doing. Okay, so here's one other way to think about how we do the continuous management of process performance. 3 levels I'm going to show you. At this top level, it's about strategy. It's about all of our processes. We had a quick kind of run through there for the university example. What's the vision, mission, values, whatever it's called? What's the value proposition? That is to say, what are the promises we make? And a tip, I go through the vision, mission statements with a highlighter pen and look for the verbs, because they're probably going to point to things we promise. So what do we promise and to whom? That lets us form the architecture, the process architecture from the top down. Okay, then at that point, we were dealing with all of the processes. Now we're going to take it process by process. So now we're going to have, what's this for this particular process? Who are the stakeholders? Good question. What do they want? How do we amalgamate all of their wants and needs into a coherent set of process KPIs and targets? Because now we've defined what the process is supposed to do. So that was about defining performance. Now, of course, we can't stop there. We've got to go on and manage it. So we're looking for performance gaps. Importantly, we need to say, do we care? What is the impact of fixing this gap or not fixing this gap? Maybe we don't care. Maybe it's not a priority. Maybe we've got 1,000 gaps and we can't fix them all. So we need to have some way of deciding. And then we need to, for the ones that we do need to change, we need to close that gap, we need to make the change and know that we've done that. So we start out with all the processes, as it were, and then for each process, we're going to define performance, and then we're going to manage performance. And those bottom 2 steps, where we're looking at individual processes, that's what I'm calling these days active process management. We really have to get stuck in there and do it. Yeah, we have to make sure that we're seriously looking at these processes, not just modeling. Modeling will be important; it's a part of it, but it's just one part. The point is to manage the process, and the point of that is to optimize performance on an ongoing basis. Now, as we come to finish here, let's just dive down right into the weeds to see, what does this feel like? What does this active process management feel like for a process owner or for people who are engaged with management of a cross-functional process? Now, this is a part mythical, part real example. I've put this together in a bunch of tables just for presentation purposes. It's a data set that needs to exist in some way, and it can exist in all sorts of ways, including in your modeling platform, perhaps. But we need, of course, to name the process. We need to know who the process owner is. This process is called C2. That's a core level 2 process. We need a process description, a useful description that would tell someone who doesn't understand it something about what it's about. A summary of what's going on for the process. Now, you've just got a 2-line summary there, but it could be a 2-page summary. You could put a link in the record off to a 20-page report if you needed to. But just an overview. What's happening here? Why is this important? Then through the middle there, we've defined the KPIs for the process. We're just showing 3 of them here for simplicity's sake, but we've got KPIs about number recruited, about student dropout rate, and about recruitment to schedule. Recruitment to target, dropout rate, and recruitment to schedule. We've got targets here, quantified, measurable targets. We've got something here about the measurement method. Now, this is very cryptic, of course. In this example, we need to know a heck of a lot more than student admission records. There are millions of those. Which ones? How do we get it? Who's going to get it? When do we get it? Etc. Current level of performance, give us some sense. And then what's the impact of closing or not closing the gap? Do we care? Who cares? Do we care enough to fix it? No point starting change projects, if nobody cares enough, they're the projects that will fail. So we've got the KPIs and we've got some analysis of what's going on there. And then we keep this summary of actions. Now you'll see the KPIs were numbered here, just 1, 2, 3, and that ID is used down here. So we've got actions that are targeted to impact on particular KPIs. And all sorts of people might be running with these actions. It's just across the university, all sorts of things that we've agreed that need to be done to improve performance for a particular KPI. So I just wanted to whiz through that because it gives you a sense of, you know, when I say active process management, I mean active process management. You know, I mean, let's understand this process deeply. It's a high impact process, so let's get the people together who know about it. Let's understand it deeply. Let's get good KPIs. Let's understand where its strengths and weaknesses are. Where are the risks? What's happening? How is it performing? Lots of other things we would do as well, but that just gives you a sense of what I mean. Now, here's the question. This is the Tregear test. This is a question I like to put to people. What if? What if the most efficient and effective process in your organization was the process that improved your other processes? What if the thing you were best at was improving processes? What impact do you think that would have in your organization? Well, I think it would be profound, wouldn't it? The thing you were best at was improving processes. So this is the Tregear test. Or you might be thinking, no, that's not going to happen. This is Roger's romance. Well, I think you can do it. And I've just been explaining to you how you can. Thanks for listening. We've got time for some questions. I guess David will go through and chuck them at me. If you're talking, David, you're on mute.
Sorry, Roger, I couldn't find the unmute button. I apologise. Thank you for that very thought-provoking and interesting this presentation today. We've got a few questions. The first one is, you spoke about discovering and documenting a process architecture. How long does that take and how is it done?
Yeah, okay, so this is a common question because people seem to think it's going to take a long, long time. Now, the glib answer, of course, is that it takes forever. That's the continuous piece of continuous management. You know, it'll keep changing. But what we mean is, I think, how long does it take to get to a process architecture that can be a reasonable management tool? You know, how long before it's actually going to be useful to the management and hopefully to the executive committee? Well, when I do this, assuming we're starting from scratch, and it's not always the case, but let's say we're starting from a blank sheet, we would probably have 2 weeks of workshops, and they're normally just in the morning, 2 or 3 hour workshops. We do that for 2 weeks. We stop that for a couple of weeks, give people some breathing space, and come back and do it again. So, you know, it's over, I don't know, it's kind of 4 weeks of project time spread over 6 or 8 weeks. So it's a couple of months, you know, the answer. It's not 6 months, it's not 12 months. You know, I was talking to someone the other day who was explaining to me that they've been working on their process architecture all year. It's been one of their COVID projects, and sometime middle of next year, they hope they'll have it finished. Really? That's way too long. Because you're going to lose, you know, the organization is going to lose interest long before you get to that point. So a couple of months elapsed time, I don't know, 4 weeks or so of actual project time.
Thanks, Roger. The next question is actually related to that. Quite a few people have asked, how do you convince management that this exercise is actually worthwhile?
Yep. And that's a fundamentally important thing to do, isn't it? Because you can start this work bottom up or middle out, but you really can't finish it unless it's top down. So what I do to organizations, I go back to my primacy of process picture. Remember the vertical and the horizontal? And when you ask executives, how do we get stuff done here? Well, it's across the org chart. Yep, we all agree with that. Okay, who's managing across? Nobody? Does that sound like a good idea? Let me check the strategy. Does it say we hope it all comes together nicely? Probably not. So I think you can make the case easily enough that we need to do something. Now, of course, I had a conversation just earlier this week with a chief executive who said to me, why would we want to manage processes? I'm trying to get rid of them. Now, that's a fundamentally different, and I would, of course, say misguided view of what a process is. So you've got to get past that point. But getting stuff done across the organization isn't a hard case to make. Oftentimes, though, that sounds like we're going to change the world and we're going to do it overnight. And, we just don't have the bandwidth to even think about that. Well, that's why I say just pick a small number, pick 5 or pick 1 if you need to, demonstrate it, pick 2 or 3 and show how it's done. Just deal with this fear that you're going to absorb the entire organization in process modeling workshops, because that's what many executives hear you say when you say we need to do some of the things I'm talking about. But I think it's basic, it's how we execute strategy and no one's managing it.
That it also leads on to another question that a few people have asked, in that you've discussed starting with just a few processes, around 5 or so, out of the hundreds or more that exist within the organisation. What risk is there that the key decision makers in the organisation may be underwhelmed by that low level of engagement? I certainly know I've fallen across that myself over the years. That'd be great to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so I think you also need to ask the companion question, what is the chance that the organisation is going to be overwhelmed if we say we're going to manage 300 processes? Because, that's just not going to work. So, I think we need to bring people along with us. You need to have whatever version it is of the primacy of process conversation. And we need to understand what a process architecture is. And we need to talk about high impact processes and the fact that we're not going to we're never ever going to try and actively manage in this way hundreds of processes. I guess if you were, level 5 maturity and you'd been there for a long time, maybe you're getting at that point, but it's not what we're meaning. It's not our aspiration. So we need to have that conversation and be clear about that. This is all mindset enabler. Yeah, we need to understand what it is we're saying and what we're trying to do and what we're not trying to do. And then all we're trying to do here is take it easy. And if you explain it in that way, we're going to do 5 processes, and we think in 2 months or 3 months time we'll do another 5, and then we'll have 10, and so by the end of the year we'll get another 10 after that. We'll have 20, and these are the processes. Here, let me show you them on the architecture. They're the big hairy processes. Probably you've decided they're the high impact processes. So I don't think, and it's all done in the sense that we're piloting this and we want to demonstrate how it works. So we're not saying we're just going to do 3 processes and that's all we're ever going to do, but we're going to start with 3. And we'll end up with 30 or more, but probably not 300 in our lifetime. Because remember also, of course, that if we're talking about a process at any level, if it's working well enough according to nicely structured KPIs and targets, if all of that looks good, then it's reasonable to assume that the performance of its sub-processes is good enough. It doesn't mean that we couldn't improve processes down below, perhaps we can, but the higher level process is doing what the stakeholders want it to do. So what's the problem you're trying to fix? Well, so we don't have to manage every process, down to, I don't know, level 6. You're literally in thousands of processes when you get there. And some processes you will, once you get to some sort of status quo, some processes you'll put under active management, but for a time limited period, because there's something going on, some big change, something happened, and then the process gets, pretty dead stable and everyone's keen on it. Well, put a few flags in there to tell you if anything changes, but you're not going to be managing it as actively as you used to. We've got a limited set of resources, we've got to focus. It's an infinite space and a limited amount of attention and resources that we can apply to optimizing performance. So we need to pick winners. We certainly don't want to underwhelm people, but we don't want to overwhelm them either. That is going to be a challenge.
One of the other questions that's been asked is, of the 7 enablers of BPN you've mentioned, which one or more do organisations most struggle with?
Yeah, so this depends a bit on the organisation, of course, and each of the enablers is hard. There's no easy one. Some are easier than others in particular organisations, and individuals have different experiences with them as well. My experience across lots of organisations is that the thing that I think is hardest, and sometimes it's underestimated at the same time, which is dangerous, is mindset. I think in some organisations that battle has already been fought and won. No problem. But in many places, we know it's hard to change people's minds. Of course, that's a good idea. That's a good thing, because if we have changed their mind, it's hard for it to change back. But I think mindset is generally the most difficult one. And if you can't get that, then we don't have support, we don't have buy-in. We're just nuisance value. And if process-based management needs to be a new solution, not a new problem.
I think that's a very good point. Maybe we, as we're running short of time, we might end at that point. There's been some more good questions come online, but we'll see if we can get answers for some of your questions with Roger beyond the session today. I want to once again thank Roger for his excellent thought-provoking presentation. It was very interesting, and I'd like to mention that Interfacing offers support software in terms of our digital twin applications that document, analyze, improves, digitizes and monitors your business processes. More information can be found on our Enterprise Process Center digital business platform, which can be found at www.interfacing.com. So thank you all for attending, and very soon after this webinar, you'll receive a brief survey and an email where you can download today's presentation. You will also have our contact details, so I urge you to reach out to us and if you have any more questions regarding your process-based initiatives. Thank you for attending the webinar at whatever time you are in the world. Thank you all.
Thank you.